Welcome to the Workplace Podcast in association with Dynamic Partners. We've got an incredible guest today, and we're really excited for the insights and ideas they'll be sharing. There are so many practical learnings from this conversation that will make a difference to you, your team, or your organization. Whether you're navigating leadership challenges, building high-performing teams, or driving organizational change, today's episode has something valuable for you. If your organisation is interested in exploring this topic further or would benefit from a workshop, feel free to get in touch via our website, dynamicpartners.ie. Now, let's start the conversation. Today's guest is author and speaker Camilla Kring. Camilla is a visionary engineer with a passion for transforming how we live and work. With a PhD in work-life balance and expertise in chronobiology, she founded Super Navigators to help individuals and organizations create flexible workplaces that accommodate different chronotypes and family structures. Since 2005, she has consulted with organizations on 4 continents to create healthier, more productive work environments. Her insights have been featured in the New York Times, the BBC, and The Guardian. Camilla is a time activist, dedicated to creating fairer and more flexible time structures in work and society. In 2006, she founded Bee Society, a non-profit organisation advocating for later start times in schools and workplaces. She challenges the cultural bias that favours early risers and pushes night owls to adapt. Her vision is a world where all chronotypes have equal opportunities to thrive in health, education, and work.
Welcome to the Workplace Podcast. Joining us today is Camilla Kring, and our topic today is productive work rhythms. Camilla, welcome to the Workplace Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Camilla, we were introduced to each other at the Thinkers50 Gala by Dory Clark, and you spoke about your book and your topic of expertise, ChronoLeadership. Because I was really curious about this, and we definitely didn't have enough time to speak. So I'm delighted that we have time here, and I've read your book, and what you were explaining to me at the gala at Thinkers50, and by the way, a big shout out to Dory Clark for introducing us, is you have a deep interest in chronobiology and the
Yes.
study of circadian rhythms or sleep wake rhythms. So just on that, like, what made you choose this as your topic of interest? Like, people might be fascinated by this. Was it through frustration? Was it through self-knowing? Because we're talking just before the podcast about, you know, expertise, and you were talking about time management and then leadership and high performance teams. Like, why this topic?
I have a background in engineer. In engineering. I did my PhD in work-life balance. And when I did my PhD back in 2003,
Yeah.
I was reading an article about chronobiology. Very fascinating. Chronobiologists have found the first clock gene PER3, controlling if you're a morning person or more an evening person. I've never been a morning person myself. So when I was reading this article, I got a language for my own rhythm. And I decided to change my working hours for my PhD. So I was doing my PhD between midday and midnight. I'm an afternoon and evening person. I'm not a night person and I'm not a morning person, but I have a lot of energy in the afternoon and evening. I'm also writing my books from 2 p.m. and then until midnight.
And I found that really interesting, and I was able to identify with this. So in the book, you talk about how to identify yourself as a chronotype. So it's an early chronotype, if I remember that correctly, and late chronotype, and obviously there's variations in between. So you go that
Yeah.
book, and then I was telling you earlier on, I'm a twin. So you have twins, daughters, is it that I remember? One is early and one is late. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, my daughter is a late chronotype and my son is an early chronotype. They're 12 years old right now. And my son also is becoming later now because he's becoming a teenager. And almost all teenagers are late chronotypes because they go to bed later and get up later. And researchers believe it's because of the hormone testosterone that we are going to bed later and get up later. So even if you are born as an early riser, you will still, or most of the people will be late risers when they are teenagers.
Yeah, well, that is fascinating to know, isn't it? Because we think we're getting more self-aware as teenagers, but we have to go through that maturity development and physical development first. And I found this fascinating because I was thinking about my own father. He was very much a late chronotype. And I was, and for me, I know I have an allergy to working late in the evenings. I have no problem with getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning and doing all my best work there. But what I'd like to do first, before we go into that, is tell you why I liked this book. So, really, what you're doing is we're talking about that early chronotype, which is that early bird or the night owl, as we might know in common language. There is you figure out the difference between the two. And what I found fascinating about reading this book was there's a bias against people with different rhythms. Also in the book, then you go into that history of how work routines came about and identifying your own chronotype, and actually the most famous people who have different chronotypes. And what I really like about it then is where you talk about sleep rhythms and your patterns to of your sleep or wake cycles to be more productive, or how that impacts on productivity. So especially the research when they did talked about exams there and productivity and focus, and then how it relates then to the workplace, then how people can really organize themselves for these improved work rhythms. And you're talking about, I suppose, an approach to diversity here, and you talk about the goals of B Society in the group. Can you just tell us a little bit about that? Because there's a purpose behind this book.
Yes, I founded the Bee Society back in 2006, so it's 20 years ago. And the purpose is to create later starting times in schools and workplaces. So it's supporting our diversity in chronotypes, especially also in the school system. We know that teenagers, young people are late chronotype. So to implement a later starting time in the school system means that they get more sleep and also better learning. So here in Denmark, we also see now that more schools are implementing or experimenting with a later starting time, but it takes time also to change the system. And the state of California, also after three chronobiologists was awarded the Nobel Prize in Medicine in 2017, the state of California decided that high schools cannot start before 8:30 in the morning, also because of the research of chronobiology. So I have this life purpose also to create a new time architecture in our societies, especially also when we are knowledge workers. There are 1 billion knowledge workers on the planet Earth. And we have been in this transition from the industrial workplace where 80% of a company's value was material, buildings, and machine. And in today's society, over 90% of a company's value is intangible values. So it's human beings creating the value. So instead of forcing people to fit into a system, also like Friedrich Winslow Taylor said with scientific management in 1911, in the future, the system must be first. So we had to adapt to this system, where my purpose is how can we create time architecture in our society, in our educational system, and workplaces, where we adapt time rhythms and time structures to our diversity, both in family rhythms, in work rhythms, and in circadian rhythms.
This is all very fascinating, and some people are their mind might boggle with the complexity to change all of these systems, and other people might be saying, you know what, this is just another piece of wokeism there, or and this is really driving me crazy right now. Like, why can't people just get on with it and stick to the system?
It's genetic. You are born with a circadian rhythm. Researchers believe it's a part of the human evolution. Then we were living outside. It's been very good that there's been this diversity in people's circadian rhythms, that some people going to bed early and get up early, and other people are going to bed later and get up later. So if all of us have been genetic programmed to be sleeping and being awake at the same time, we have not been here today. So chronodiversity is a part of human evolution, and plants, animals, and humans have this internal clock deep inside our brain. Is called suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN. It's the master clock in our brain, and it's the conductor of all the rhythms in your body. All your cells in your body has a clock, and it's controlled by the master clock in your brain, and you need the daylight exposure into your eyes to tell you now it's daylight on the planet, and then sleep in darkness. But we have this diversity in our circadian rhythms when we are sleeping and when we are awake. It's something you're born with. It's not something you choose. And research shows that it comes with a price to fake an early rise. So 30% of the population are what we call early chronotypes, like you are. You can get up and you have great energy at 6 o'clock in the morning. Then 30% of the population are what we call intermediate chronotype. And if people need 8 hours of sleep, it will be people who sleep between midnight and 8 o'clock in the morning. And then we have 40% late chronotypes. So it's people who go into bed later and get up later if that could be possible for them. The problem is that 80% of our population are woken up by an alarm clock. Both here in Europe, in US, in Asia, people are interrupting their sleep to fit into an old time system from the industrial society. And research in chronobiology shows that, for example, Russell Foster, he's a professor in chronobiology, in his book Lifetime, he says that if you need an alarm clock, you're living out of sync with your internal clock. And when you're living out of sync with your internal clock, there is a health risk. And health risk is there's an increased risk for cancer, diabetes, heart diseases, mental illness.
And I identified with this myself. So I have a cousin Mary who I was talking about bedtimes, and she says to go to bed really early because I'm an early chronotype.
Yeah,
And it would not be unheard of me to go to bed at 9:30 or 10
yeah,
o'clock
yeah,
on a regular basis. But then I naturally wake at 6 o'clock in the morning. That's at or 6:30, right? A sleep in for me might be 8 o'clock in the morning on the weekend. I'm like, that's
yeah,
brilliant. Um, and then you talked about the health risks then. So I remember when I was a student and I was in college, I had a job where I worked at night in a petrol station. Um, and I found it really hard to sleep through the day. So I used to take little naps and different things like that. But then what you were saying is a lot of research then for people who do night work then on top of that, that if they're going against their natural rhythm there, especially if they're early chronotype there, that's where the physical health
yeah.
consequences is happen there. So just on that then can you help us understand your optimal sleep window? So for me, what you were saying earlier on is I don't need an alarm clock because I wake naturally at 6.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little, because in the book then you go into, well, sometimes power naps can be used. My family growing up were a big fan of power naps. Can you just tell us about this a little bit more? The optimal
Yeah.
sleep window.
Yeah, the natural sleep window is when it's best for you to sleep. So we have to understand what is sleep. Sleep is two things. So one dimension is, do you sleep enough? That's the sleep duration. And then the other dimension is your sleep and awake cycle. So that is your circadian rhythm. And both of the things in your sleep are equal important. So do you get enough sleep? And also, do you sleep at the right time? The right time is your sleep window. And your sleep window or your chronotype is independent of your sleep duration. So people who are having a sleep midpoint at 4, they are intermediate chronotypes. And if you have a sleep midpoint at 4 and have a sleep duration for 8 hours, that will be between midnight and 8 o'clock in the morning. That will be your ideal sleep window. But if you, for example, only need 6 hours a day, then you could sleep between 1 o'clock in the night and 7 o'clock in the morning and still be an intermediate chronotype. When you are an early chronotype, as you are, then you will go to bed also, as you said, around 9:30, 10, and then sleep until 6 o'clock in the morning. So you will have a sleep midpoint around 2 o'clock in the night. I'm in between the intermediate chronotype and a late chronotype. So my optimal sleep window is after midnight and then around 8:30 in the morning. Between 8 and 9, I will wake up naturally. And research also shows that we get our REM sleep, the rapid eye movement sleep, is in the end of our sleep architecture. So if we have an alarm clock, it means that we actually cut off our REM sleep. And in the REM sleep, you have emotional regulation, you have creativity, productivity, and so on. So just by finding your optimal sleep window and finding out, can you make small changes in the way, for example, is it possible for you to sleep in on Wednesday instead of, for example, get a whole week of social jet lag if you are a late chronotype? If you are an early chronotype, as you are, then often you sleep very well from Monday to Friday. But often in the weekend, you don't sleep so much because of the social pressure to stay up later. For example, if you get your friends over for dinner Friday evening and they never go home, as an early chronotype, you always wake up early. So if you go to bed at 2 o'clock in the night Friday evening, you wake up early at 6 o'clock Saturday, and you wake up early at 6 o'clock Sunday. So that's classic early chronotype. You always wake up early. If you are a late chronotype and you are interrupting your sleep by an alarm clock, it's not that you can just go to bed early, for example, Monday evening, unless you are sleep deprived, then you can sleep all the time. But if you are normally for a late chronotype, you will go to bed later, be woken up by an alarm clock. It means that you sleep too few hours between Monday and Friday, and then you will have an extreme sleep pressure in front of you, and then you will sleep more in the weekend. So that's classic late chronotype, that you sleep fewer hours from Monday to Friday on work days, and then you sleep more in the weekend. But it comes with a price, which researchers call social jet lag. Is a term coined by Professor Till Rönneberg. He's based in Munich, and he has calculated more than 300,000 people's chronotype by Munich Chronotype Questionnaire.
So this social jet lag, you're going to laugh at this, Camilla. Camilla, do you remember I was actually running out the door at Thinkers50 at the gala, and I'll tell
Yeah.
you why. I remember I was telling you I had a flight at 5:30 in the morning, and I had to get up really early, and I was
Yeah.
trying to avoid social jet lag because I was
Yeah.
working the next day. I was delivering a workshop, and that for me was, remember, I says, I really have to go. I really, and there was like 4 or 5 people waiting to talk to me, and I was like, I really have to go, people. So for the people who were I was being rude to, I'm sorry about that. But that's that case of social jet lag, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
that we're trying to, uh, we suffer by not going to bed at whatever time there, or we're getting up too early there, according to our chronotype. Fascinating stuff. Now, just on that, then, some people might be listening in, kind of going, "Will you just get on with it?" Late risers, you're saying, get a bad rap then, because you say in the book that because of your chronotype doesn't mean that you're not productive. So there is that myth that the early bird catches the worm
Yeah.
there, and that's where you say in the book it goes back to agrarian times, how
Yeah.
originally did that. And you know what I found fascinating was where the term clock came from. Clock, at the Latin term for bells. So this is being this is how just how we see the systems. You talk about the systemic approach to
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
so just on that, just that bad rap, because there's a history to this as well, isn't there?
If this conversation has you thinking about getting better at conflict in your team, now is a good time to act on it. Resolution intelligence helps leaders bend the arc of conflict toward healthy resolution, navigating challenges with confidence and saving time, money, and relationships. Visit resolution-intelligence.com to get your personal resolution intelligence report and take the first step.
Yeah, the history of time. Let's go into that. Because when the bell was invented, the mechanical bell was invented around 1283, it was the monk who took this bell. And when the bell was ringing, they were praying. When the bell was ringing, they were reading. When the bell was ringing, they were eating and sleeping. So they were divided their life into bells were ringing. But just 100 years after this invention of the mechanical clock, we see that the bell is coming out to the tower bells. For example, in a German city, Cologne, in 1375, when the bell is ringing, people are going to work. When the bell is ringing, they are eating lunch. And when the bell is ringing, they're going home again. So the clock time won over the natural time in 1375. So we have been disciplined to be the disciples of the clock long time before the Industrial Revolution. And it's been very productive. When we're speaking about productive rhythms in the work life, it's been fantastic with the industrial society and the industrial workplaces. Scientific management increased a lot of the value that we could synchronize human beings at the assembly line, have same working hours, same working rhythm, working place, and so on, because we need to working 9 to 5, be in the same rhythm. But in today's society, when we speak about knowledge workers, and more of the work we are doing are produced by minds, but we still have to unlearn and also redesign time architecture in our societies, because we have a lot of early riser propaganda, what I call it. For example, the book, The 5 a.m. Club, where it makes sense if you are an early chronotype to start early and get something out of the day, start with the most complicated task. But if you are an intermediate chronotype or late chronotype, and we talk about 70% of the population are intermediate chronotype or late chronotype, then you should not start with the most complex task early in the morning. For example, Ryan Holiday, in his book, Self-Discipline, or it's about discipline and self-discipline and destiny. He has chapter 3 about Attack the Dawn. And Attack the Dawn only makes sense if you are an early chronotype. If you are a late chronotype, you should attack the afternoon or attack the evening. That would make much more sense. But a lot of management theory and a lot of management books is about starting with the most complex task early in the morning, or have focus time in the morning, or focus time before midday. But that's not very productive for most of the population. And when we are knowledge workers, it's about finding your optimal rhythms. So circadian rhythms and chronoleadership is about how we can optimize rhythms in our individual lives, but also in our teams and in the organizations, so we can synchronize our rhythms. Also, when we talk about when should we place team meetings, it's not very good and very productive to have team meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning where most of the team members are not awake.
So just on that then, because there's some people might be listening in here and they might be saying, "Oh, this is unnecessary complexity to an already strained workplace." So we talk about flexible working and we talk about different ways of working and all that type of stuff. And now what you're saying is you're labeling a late chronotype against an early chronotype, and you're pitting this against each other. Say, listen, there's a bit of tension out there. I think it should be at 8 o'clock because that's when I'm at best. And some people are, maybe should we have a 4 o'clock? Eh, what would you say to people like that to say actually you're adding another layer of complexity here that we don't need?
I think if you are not looking into this area, then you will not unleash a lot of productivity. Because if you are a late chronotype or an intermediate chronotype and working at 8 o'clock in the morning, you're not very productive.
Yeah.
And actually, you are also cutting off some of your REM sleep. And it could be that if you have children and they're waking you up, that's something else. But if you are actually waking yourself up with an alarm clock and then waking your children up, forcing them to school at 8 o'clock in the morning, and then start working, there is something also with our rhythms in our society. They are not very productive. So when we talk about productive rhythms also in a workplace, it could be small changes, small adjustment. It could be that we place meetings at 9:30. Sometimes that has an influence on traffic, so you can halve your transport time if you have a physical meeting. And then both chronotypes will be awake, and you will have better meetings, for example. And if you are an early chronotype, you can have focus time at 6 o'clock in the morning, as you have. And when you are a late chronotype, you can have your focus time in the afternoon or evening. So
Yeah.
this is not, I don't think this is rocket science. I think it's a lens. When you start and begin to understand the world through the lens of chronobiology, you see things differently. And you start to understand your own chronotype. You get awareness about, when am I most productive? At what times of day is it best for me to solve a complex task? Instead of just doing it, the habits, as we were talking about before we starting up. How can you create great habits in your life? And it's not a great habit for a late chronotype starting to work at 8 o'clock in the morning with a complex task. That's a bad idea.
Yeah. And this is where we've done a podcast episode on the 4-day working week as well. And then we've also created 2 podcasts with Callie Yost. So she's an expert in remote working and flexible working. She's got her own um, model and infrastructure around that. And that what I like is you're given that little bit of depth then to say, okay, this is to do with that time flexibility, then to say, okay, how is it that we can actually self-organize here so we can all be productive there? And then it's about figuring out, well, for me, it's morning time. For you, it's afternoon. Okay. And that's when your focus periods are there. So how do we come to a compromise or a negotiation around team meetings or deliverables there? Is that really where you're coming to at the end of the book,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Yeah, and for example, also if you are a leader, to be aware also of your chronotype and also signal to, your team, your organization, what chronotype do I have? And also there is a social respect also of different chronotypes. And we have this early riser bias. Research shows that just by starting early in a company, you get higher performance evaluation than by starting later. So it is a part of this mindset also from the agrarian society. Early to bed and early to rise. That makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. As Benjamin
Yeah.
Franklin said, the early bird catches the worm. In France and in Spain, they say, if you get up early, God will come and give you a helping hand. There's no God if you sit up until midnight and working hard. So it's about another kind of productivity when you are knowledge workers. It is about, how can we make adjustment? How can we design work times and structures supporting you as a human being and also your energy patterns? If you are a morning person, if you are more an afternoon person or an evening person, And for example, when we talk about shift workers, it could also be, and there's 20% of the population are shift workers. It's negative for your health if you are an early chronotype and you're working night. You should not
Yeah.
do that. But it has also a negative impact on late chronotype to work at 7 o'clock in the morning. So it's something where we can use AI to plan shifts around our circadian rhythms. So a match between circadian rhythms and also our working hours, and then you could add family rhythms because there is a lot of family constellations in our society. So, for example, if you have children and you are divorced, you can work a lot evening shift if you are late chronotypes in the weeks where you don't have your children.
I see. Some people might be saying AI is great for managing the complexity, but then they're kind of going, "Am I revealing too much about myself?" But that's a different ethical dilemma there. But while we're on it, so you're after saying, the different types of chronotype then. So is it okay if we go through these? So, like,
Yeah,
how would I recognize myself? If I'm listening in here, an early chronotype then. So I'm thinking for me, we just said is that I wake up early and I get tired, fairly easily there. And I know when my peak mentally and physically is in early on in the day. So that's where, for example, I like to do exercise and different things like that. What else like might I be looking out for to identify me as an early chronotype?
if you are an early chronotype, you always wake up early. So
Mm,
that's a classic. Also, when you can go directly from bed to work because you have
yeah.
a higher body temperature in the morning than if you are a late chronotype.
Yeah.
So your master clock in your brain is controlling also the 24-hour day and night cycle here on planet Earth. When you are an early chronotype, you see this boost also in cortisol when you wake up and you can just go from bed to work. So a classic thing for early chronotype is that you have the best energy of the day before midday, and a lot of early chronotypes can say, "Well, I have had my peak performance when it's midday." So
I,
that's classic A.
I was laughing as I was reading this book because when I got to a Friday evening in school or Friday afternoon, um, I actually didn't go to school on Friday afternoon because it was like the end of the week and it was the worst energy for me. And I actually, when I finished my school studies, I pulled out a book with all my school notes in it. And it was actually school notes I used to recycle. I used to give to the teacher and then take it back because I just could not stand it. Even when I went to the workplace, then, I would find different ways to manage my energy then on a Friday afternoon. So I have to sometimes accommodate. Obviously, I still work Friday afternoons now. I can't avoid it too much. But when I can, I feel like I'm going on holidays
Yeah,
for the weekend. And just on that, then, right? Is there any advice then to say if I'm struggling in the afternoon? Then
yeah,
what advice would you give to me or the different people who like struggle in with the afternoon? You know what they call the
yeah,
3 o'clock slump.
yeah. And it's I think the first thing is also here to be aware. I call it energy animal.
Mm,
So energy animal is about, if you look into, some people are dromedary, it's people who peak, one time a day. If you are camel, you have a peak before lunch and then it's going down after lunch and then it's coming up again. Then you are a camel. So it's also finding out what time of day do you peak and what time of the day do you feel that you need some restitution. Or maybe you should go outside and also get, some daylight. Um, if we are sitting indoor, we only get 300 lux. There's only 300 lux indoor. We measure light in lux.
mm,
If you go outside, and today the sun is shining here in Copenhagen in Denmark, so you get 100,000 lux just by getting outside. And the lux, we need that in our eyes. And it's important to get And on a cloudy day, you get 10,000 lux just by getting outside. So you need this 20 minutes daylight before midday. So it's a good idea to get outside as quickly as possible after you wake up. But for example, getting outside and get the daylight, it could be 5 minutes in the afternoon if you feel you have a dip.
I'm going to return to my childhood here when I went to secondary school. And for me to survive the afternoons, I would often go to sleep at lunchtime. I used to walk home from school at lunchtime, and so for power naps then, because you speak about your
Yeah,
different times where you can actually use sleep there,
yeah.
and I was very interested about that because I was like, oh, hold on here, I was being intuitive to my own sleep cycles and wakes patterns, as you were saying in the book.
It's also depending if we speak about two-phase sleep, then you can divide your sleep into two portions of sleep. Then you need at least two sleep cycle, and one sleep cycle is 90 minutes. So you need to sleep at least 3 hours then in the afternoon, and then
Yeah.
4.5 hours in the night. It is possible to divide our sleep into two phases. Power naps, it works for some people, it doesn't work for other people. And again, it's about not sleeping more than 20 minutes. So it should be short sleeping. And it's important to understand this dimension of sleep. We call it sleep pressure. So when you have had a good night of sleep, your sleep pressure is low, and then you build up a sleep pressure during the day. So if you get, for example, if you go to bed at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and take sleep for a half hour, an hour, that may not be good for you, because then you will postpone at what time you actually can fall asleep, because your sleep pressure will go down, and then you have to build some new sleep pressure to fall asleep. So for example, power naps, Professor Till Rønneberg, he says that power naps can be good for some people, and other people, yeah, power nap will not function very well for them. I'm not a power nap person, for example. If I take a power nap, I feel it can be very hard for me to wake up. So it's much better that I then try to sleep in sync with my sleep window. And the days where I can get up at 8 o'clock in the morning or 8:30, I can actually have a high level of energy then until midnight. Because I've had this very good amount of sleep and also REM sleep.
If this conversation has you thinking about getting better at conflict in your team, now is a good time to act on it. Resolution intelligence helps leaders bend the arc of conflict toward healthy resolution, navigating challenges with confidence and saving time, money, and relationships. Visit resolution-intelligence.com to get your personal resolution intelligence report and take the first step.
So, what I find interesting then as well is the famous early chronotypes. So, for example, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, is known to start his day at 4:30. If you're a fan of Michelle Obama or Richard Branson or Howard Schultz, they're all within that. And Howard Schultz is also a 4:30 person, as is Michelle Obama with her exercise at 4:30. So very interesting. So late chronotypes then. Tell me a little bit about that. How would I
Yeah.
recognize that if I'm a late chronotype?
You recognize that you are a late chronotype if you, for example, need to get up early and you need an alarm clock, and you are feeling very energized in the afternoon and evening. That's classic late chronotypes. But if you have to fit into the 9 to 5 society as a late chronotype, what happens is that you are woken up by an alarm clock, and then you sleep too few hours from Monday to Friday, and it's classic late chronotypes to sleep in Saturday. So, for example, you will sleep in, you wake up late in the morning, Saturday and Sunday. So it's classic B to get too few hours of sleep from Monday to Friday, and then sleep in the weekend. So you know you are a late chronotype if you have great energy in the afternoon and evening. You will meet the late chronotype who really feel that their brain is peaking at 10 o'clock in the evening. They are working. I have been working with teams where they are active 22 hours out of 24 hours. So you have some people working until 1 o'clock in the night, and you have people getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning and start working. So if you have this understanding also of your team's rhythm, then it's also a way to find out when should we work together, when should we work separately, but also have an understanding of each other's circadian rhythms and also that we are different.
What was revealing there was when I read the book, I was thinking there's opportunities here if I'm a late chronotype or early chronotype then, and I'm working with somebody in a different time zone. Because you talk about this in the book, and we might go back to that because I thought it fascinating. The history of this as well is that there's an opportunity then in in that to say, listen, let's match people up on our team that's best suited for that time zone based on this, and everybody's productive then as well. And
Yeah.
there, so there's an opportunity there, which is fascinating. What I also liked in the book was the diagrams that you have where you have the alertness there and where the start of the melatonin,
Yeah.
I suppose, secretion happens. And I think that's really interesting in the book. So I definitely recommend, if you're interested in this topic, to do that. If I am a late chronotype, then it's getting dark in the evenings. And there, so you're talking about that lux, that light that we get. Like,
Yeah.
how do I re-energize then if I'm a late chronotype?
It's very important both for early chronotypes and late chronotypes to get outside and get the daylight before midday, because we need to synchronize. Our master clock also needs to synchronize us to the Earth's rotation around its own axis, and that's approximately 24-hour day and night cycle. So you need to get out and be exposed to this 10,000 lux or 100,000 lux, because if you sit indoor the whole day, then you will not get enough contrast between light and darkness. And that's actually what we need for our internal clock to function. And if you are a late chronotype, a lot of late chronotypes actually can exercise later in the day. Also, when you are a late chronotype, have a calm morning. It's like, when you are an early chronotype, have an active morning. But if you are a late chronotype, it takes you longer time to start. A lot of late chronotype will feel that they get more energy after 10 a.m. They feel that they start to, be awake, and then find out when is your optimal productive work rhythms during the day, and how can you find out at those time actually attack the afternoon or the evening. So that's something I will recommend. For example, exercise also, it could be in the afternoon.
Yeah. So famous late chronotypes then, funny enough, is the opposite to Michelle is Barack Obama, who's a late chronotype. There, Mark Zuckerberg, so the opposite to Apple there. And the one thing that struck me then was Stephen King there. And I remember doing a bit of research on Stephen King before, especially when it comes to creativity. And what he did is he used to work a job that had low mental energy tasks during the day, so that would conserve his mental energy for night. So he was able to write his books at night to sustain his living. So again, that's a good use of energy and productivity, isn't it?
Yeah.
So I thought that was fascinating. Reading that's what the chronotype that Stephen King was. Now we just talked about there about time zones then. So I found this really, really interesting there about the history of time zones.
Yeah, our time zones. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's also, again, it's about technology, because we have when we talk about the history of time, it's also this technological invention when you have
Yeah.
the invention of the mechanical clock, and how it divided our life into small pieces. When the bell was ringing, and then we were doing, certain things. When the railway was invented, then you had different times in all our local communities. And it was a Canadian engineer who said, we need to synchronize time. So it is because of the invention of the railway, we got the 24 time zones. Otherwise, there are examples about for example, transportation from the West Coast to the East Coast in US. You had to switch your phone 200 times during that trip. So it is because of the invention of the railway that we got the 24 time zones to synchronize time. That's so fascinating. And also a question could be, also in today's society, with all the technology we experience, we have had the smartphone since 2007, and also what it is doing. Also, we need to create new time architecture also in our society, so we get more freedom, also autonomy over our time. That could also be an opportunity that with the invention of the smartphone and laptop and so on.
And what I like this is just to emphasize here that what you're saying is in the industrial age, 80% of the company's value is tangible, and humans adapt to one time system. And you're saying
Yes.
like it's a comparison culture, it's Taylorism, it's a one size fits all. There's a similarity in work and family patterns that no longer exist now. So now that we're in an age of knowledge work, then the point you make in the book is 90% of the company's value is intangible. Now there's a huge range of different time rhythms and structures that we need to adapt to, and especially when we talk about diversity and as I said earlier on, family constellations. But what I really like is this is one size fits one,
Yeah.
and it's really about this is an inclusive approach to go, okay, how do we, because we're trying to get more people who are engaged, more people to stay, longer with companies, that retention piece, there. How do we make people happier, healthier, more engaged, more productive, more focused? Is essentially your point.
Yes, it is. And also how we can redesign time for our minds, because we have had this time systems for machines and factories that we should fit into the system, because 80% of the company's value was tangible. But now it's the opposite, and it is those 90%. And I see a lot of productivity and health, good health, in ChronoLeadership, how we can actually both be more productive and also increase our life satisfaction and well-being. Because this autonomy over our time, um, it's a book, Press for Time, by Judy Weisman. She's a professor at London Business School of Economics. In her book, Press for Time, she also shows that having this autonomy over our time is a direct link to life satisfaction and well-being. So how can we get more autonomy over our time as knowledge workers? And it could be small adjustment in the team level or organization level. I've been working with implementing ChronoLeadership in organizations in 17 countries the last 21 years old where I've had my company. So it's not just something I talk about, it's also something where I have practical experience, also by working, for example, when we talk about time zones, for a company in the Netherlands where they had the responsibility for 24 time zones. And then how can you match working hours here in Europe with working hours in other part of the world, where from Europe it makes sense to give a late chronotype working hours with US and an early chronotype working hours with Asia.
So just on that then, how about we go into that a little bit if it's okay, if you're okay for
Yeah,
time. And if we were to create that chrono inclusive workplace then, so within a team then,
yeah,
in the book I remember you talking about the 3 steps, is it, that to
yeah,
create this, which also creates an attractive working culture for both
exactly.
morning and evening people. So just on that then, can you talk us through your 3-step approach? If you were facilitating with a team, and you're
Yeah,
saying for the last 20 years, like what's the approach then? If I was interested in navigating this with my team, because if we're in conflict at the moment or whatever, they might be going, okay, like shit,
yeah,
how do I start the work on this? Because just before we go into that, I'm just curious, are are people open to sharing their sleep patterns? Like what, like some
yeah.
people might say, well, this is an intrusion on my privacy or something.
Mm.
I just want to play devil's advocate here on that. Like when you go to workshops with people,
Yeah. Yeah. I think also it's something, yeah, some people will share also when they go to bed and when they get up, and but it could also be just to share your chronotype if you're an early chronotype, or if you are an intermediate chronotype, or if you are a late chronotype.
yeah,
So that could also be just in general terms. The first step to create a chrono inclusive organization will be that you have a foundation of trust. And trust, I think the best model for trust I have found is in the book Unleashed by Francis Fry and Anne Morris
yeah,
from 2020, with their trust triangle: authenticity, empathy, and logic.
yeah.
But you need this fundament of trust. Otherwise, people will never dare to share their chronotype. So you need to have a fundament of trust. And then it starts also with the leader, and also be aware of your own early riser biases. Be aware of your own chronotype and share your chronotype with the people around you. And then a team exercise could be to map the chronotypes in your team and take a collective reflection round where you communicate what are your chronotype, and also finding out when is it best for us as a team to place meetings, team meetings. Maybe there is a better time to place our meetings that we have right now, but it's not something we are aware of. So the first step is chrono awareness and also chrono acceptance. And then how can we build the structures in the way that we have coordination and also deep work? So it's supporting the majority of people.
And that's what for me really stands out in this is that we're focused on a third of the population, 30% of the population, because there's a moderate, as I said, in the middle then as well, and there's a late chronotype then as
Yeah,
well, and we're all skewed towards one type there, and we that mightn't even show up in interviews or anywhere along. It's just when you start working with people, then you start to go, oh, these are people's preferences, or this is how I'm showing up, or if people are maybe cranky in the workplace, and
yeah,
because the sleep deprivation or being interrupted by the alarm there. And can I ask you the benefits then on the team as a result of this then, Camilla?
yeah.
What are they?
Increased productivity, increased life quality. I will also say that a lot of people feel that they get a better work-life balance relation, or work-life balance satisfaction. It's also linked to the autonomy over your time. But working at times where you are energized and also working more in sync with your chronotype is improving both productivity and also your health.
So, Camilla, we have covered a lot of ground here. I am fascinated. Some people are probably going to go, oh, I'd love to go to sleep right now. Some people are going to go, I can't wait to start the day. Um, if people were to find out more about you and your book, ChronoLeadership, and by the way, congratulations on your Thinkers 50. I forgot to mention that. Is that true? You were,
Yeah, I'm a
yeah,
part of the part of the Thinkers50 Radar list this year.
yeah,
Yeah.
congratulations.
Yeah, thank
Congratulations.
you.
So, if people don't know about you now, they will definitely know about you in the coming weeks and months. If they were to find out more about you, Camilla, how might they do so?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Camilla Kring, and I also have a newsletter. And there's also camillakring.com, or my company, Super Navigators. I have a whole website about chronobiology called appliedchronobiology.com. So there is many places also where you can find more information about chronobiology and chronoleadership.
Camilla, thank you so much for joining the Workplace Podcast. This has been such a fascinating conversation. One I don't normally have, but I have to say, fascinating, interesting, and definitely most worthwhile for people, especially if it gives better health outcomes. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for joining the Workplace Podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to the Workplace Podcast in association with Dynamic Partners. We really appreciate you being part of the conversation. Want to start the conversation about leadership in your organization? At Dynamic Partners, we help leaders and teams build a culture of performance that drives real results. Visit dynamicpartners.ie to find out more about our workshops and coaching services, or email info@dynamicpartners.ie to start the conversation. We're ambitious for your leadership. Are you?